All right, hello. This video is exceedingly long. The reason why is that this is an intervention video. This is a go over of every topic in conflict and tension off the top of my head for you to access, search and read around. In this video, I'm going to try and go through every single bit of content and try and make it as clear as possible. The individual recorded videos are probably going to be better to understand individual topics, but to understand the connections between them and see how conflict and tension in itself is a story, we're going to start the story here. Now, as you will probably remember, conflict and tension is split into three different categories. One section called sections. First one is called Peacemaking, the second is called League of Nations, and the third section is called The Road to War. These three sections will hopefully, if I can figure out how YouTube works, time marked so you can see when I'm talking about particular parts. And again, you should be the one checking the knowledge that you are least comfortable with. So let's get started. The interwar years. That phrasing makes us think that this is happening between two different wars, in between. So this period studies the end of the First World War, how does this war end, and then the period of time that leads into the Second World War. So we can say the period of time here is, as you can see on the screen, 1918 to 1939. So this first section, called Peacemaking, is the study about, well, how did peace get created? How did they invent such a thing? And when you were taught this, we would have talked about, right, what does war do to a place? How does war affect people, essentially? And we talked about possibly what the destruction might have been, because the destruction was for years. It wasn't just wartime for a couple of days with a couple of buildings blown up. It was years and years and years of constant destruction, bombing, and just, well, ruin. Most of the land and space in Europe was affected, and that left millions of people dead. And we have to think about how the people felt, about the destruction around them. Did they feel angry, upset, at a loss? These people would have had an experience and worry that they needed to work on. So we need to understand where those people will be most affected, right? If the destruction is, well, you know, only in one area, the people from that area are going to feel it. But this is a world war. So we identified that areas of particular battle would be happening in the areas that are being marked with red on my screen. In fact, actually, to give this a bit more truth to the matter, these areas, and if we expand France outwards, are the areas most destroyed. We could say that people in East Germany and people in France and maybe Serbia and northern Italy probably feel quite upset about the destruction raged on them, as well as all the people that have been killed. There's a few examples here of the destruction that we can imagine, so a town before and a town afterwards. And so to make peace, to make people happy and return the world to normal, we need to arguably fix this destruction. We need to get the money and the resources in the right place so that we can return the world to a normal state and people can live there again. And that is what the Treaty of Versailles is. And the peacemaking section, I would argue, is pretty much mostly a study of the Treaty of Versailles. I often refer to it as such because this document is massive and there's a lot of understanding about why it's made that way, the befores of it, the actual terms of the treaty and their consequences, and then also the later consequences. You need to understand this from a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different countries, but it's this one document that's the real true role of this peacemaking section. Now, if you can't remember, the Treaty of Versailles was created to punish Germany. This is the one treaty that was going for that one country, so be aware there are other treaties for other countries, we'll come to them later, but those treaties are less significant than this one. Now, of the people that made this, there is a big three. The Treaty of Versailles had three major leaders talking it out to organise the treaty. In reality, there's more, but these ones had the largest sway, and they're the ones that you can be questioned on in the exam. The big three are arguably the winners of the First World War, so you can predict the countries, Britain, France and USA. And we'll go through each of them individually because essentially what you need to know is who these people are and how they feel and why. So I'll talk them through individually to start. So first, we've got Woodrow Wilson of the USA. Now, hopefully you're remembering that Woodrow Wilson is, well, from a country that was not involved in World War I very much. American money and soldiers eventually went over, but the USA was not damaged in the war. It was miles and miles away from the war. This war to Americans was something happening in Europe that didn't really involve them. So he comes to the meeting, comes to the Treaty of Versailles peace talks to try and basically say, guys, let's just think about peace. He is trying to make sure war doesn't happen again, so his group doesn't get dragged in ever again. And he actually becomes quite an idealist, someone who believes that peace is a possibility. This can happen. But alongside a peacemaker, there are two other leaders who have very different opinions. Next one is David Lloyd George, who is the Prime Minister of Britain. What this means is that he is in charge, essentially, of the British Empire. And Britain experienced a bit of a different thing to the USA. Britain was heavily involved in World War I. They were sending millions of soldiers to their deaths. They were using their empire to fund a lot of the war and to take soldiers from the empire into the war. And what essentially happened to him is that as much as Britain wasn't really attacked or destroyed, Britain was bankrupted. If nothing was to happen for David Lloyd George, he needed to make money out of this to recover and so that Britain could maintain its empire. And then we've got George Clemenceau, who is the president of France, yes. And what he is doing is that he is a country that has been actively destroyed. His country is ruined. It is left to pretty much dust. So he wants peace through a method of punishment. He wants to be given things because he's been punished for years, and he wants to punish other countries to do that. Shorter form versions of these kind of descriptions I'll play on the board now. You can pause and read them. However, these are, should we say, similar to what I just described to you. They are the three leaders going through their three feelings. But for me to help you remember, there is a nice, easy way to remember how they feel towards Germany, this particular country that is being punished in the Treaty of Versailles. And it's the size of the moustache equals the size of the anger. You'll remember this phrase. This kind of phrase means that we have different people who are differently angry. They feel differently, and so they're going to argue over this situation. And when they're arguing, that means there's going to probably be someone who's not going to be happy with the treaty in the end. And all of them, in the end, are not happy. We have a famous quote from David Lloyd George that he predicted war in 25 years' time. This is insinuating that Germany's going to be so angered by this, or this treaty is not long-term safe, that people are going to get so angry that they go to war a second time. He predicted that as it came out. So as much as he does end up being fairly true, it proves to us that people are not happy with this treaty when it was made. We also have a phrase from a British MP saying squeezing the German lemon till the pips squeak, and this is referring to, should we say, squeezing as much money out of Germany as possible. You can use it to prove that Britain was trying to make money out of this situation. See, these three had to compromise, right? I told you a second ago that they are angry, they are against each other, they hate, they are fully, should we say, struggling to talk. And that is because they need to actually give in to others to actually have their idea come together. So if I was to come up with a little compromise idea, we've got person A and person B. Someone wants to go hiking, someone wants to go fishing. Those are two different ideas. The idea of compromising is to change it so that there's both people happy, right? That's how you probably imagine compromise. And this is what's called a positive compromise. Both sides, in my little argument on my board, are winning. Both sides are actually happy because both things are happening. But the Treaty of Versailles is slightly different. It is what's called a negative compromise, which is that there's no possibility of everybody being happy. And what that means is that there is someone's going to have to give up something to get something they want. Everyone is going to lose in some way, shape or form, which we will see come true later. But if the big three were left to talk about it forever, we'd probably come to a conclusion that they are actually happy with. The thing is, the big three were forced and pushed to compromise. And there are two major ways that happened. One of them is this thing called an armistice. You might not have heard the phrase, but this happens at the end of every war. When a war, a battle, a fight ends, the official end of the war is the agreement of peace, the document that everyone signs to say, okay, you get this, I get this, and we're going to stop fighting now. But there's a period of time where the fighting stops and the peace agreement is made. And that period of time is called an armistice. There is no fighting. We're by pausing the war so that we can organise the agreement. Now, that poses a question. What happens if a peace agreement cannot be agreed? If the big three fails to agree on the treaty, the war will re-begin. It will start again. It will restart because this armistice is not a certain peace. And that adds pressure, doesn't it? That makes you go like, ooh, I don't want to be responsible for the war starting again. That's going to want you to come to a compromise. And remember, these three do not agree in any way, shape or form. As well as that, there is another problem. Time. See, the big three had time pressure. They were on a clock. They were being pushed to come to a solution really fast as well. Because I showed you all that destruction earlier. All of that destruction essentially meant that there were loads of people who were homeless now. There was loads of farmland that had not been growing food for years. Loads and loads of people who now didn't have jobs. When the war pauses, that doesn't mean people stop living in it. And so with a solution and with a peace agreement, people can actually start to move on and receive their reparations and money so they can actually build their lives again. But if the big three just sit about and talk and wait for ages and ages and ages, people are going to start dying as well. So the big three are under this constant pressure. The armistice is this pressure that is, should we say, pushing people to avoid war, but also they are being pushed to stop people dying. So the best solution would be to finish something as fast as possible. And that's what the big three were doing. And they ended up coming up with the Treaty of Versailles in the space of about 6 months. Be aware, this document reorganises areas of countries. This document deals with massive amounts of money that we cannot conceive. It is an agreement between about 90 different countries. It is a massive organisational feat, and it was done in 6 months. You guys take longer to study history GCSE. 6 months was just about the amount of time it took for most of you to learn the migration unit. Think about how much work you had to do that, and these guys had done 6 months to come up with a full treaty that decides the futures of millions of people. And so when we study this, we study it through a specific amount of terms, because some of these are arguably positive and all of them have interesting consequences. So I'm going to put, not this on my board, because this is from lessons long ago, but this is the one I'm going to hold up in front of you. These are the articles you should know, and these have been handed out to you by your teacher for definite, and they're available online as well. But these are the terms we memorise. These are the ones we learn. We split them into a few different categories, but the categories I think we can remember easiest are military, territory, and other. Okay, other is just a catch-all, right? Military terms, weaponry, well, Germany's defences, right? And you can see that Article 42, demilitarise Rhineland. Article 160 for 100,000 men. 181 for German Navy, and 198 for the Air Force, does a lot of restricting and limiting Germany's army. And what you need to be able to do is to think about these, well, memorise them firstly, which hopefully all of you have done, but then being able to think about the consequences of each of them, and to think about who's going to be happy about that, who's going to be sad about that. If we can really over-talk about these specific terms, you'll have a good idea. So let me give you an example, and then we'll talk about the other terms. So, demilitarising the Rhineland. There is no army in the section between Germany and France. That means Germany's going to be undefended. That means the people of Germany are going to feel scared and worried because they could get attacked at any time, and they have no ability to defend themselves. Look, they're even worse. They don't have enough soldiers to defend themselves, or battleships, or an air force. All of these terms are trying to make the German people feel weaker, feel more worried, feel in danger. And we can imagine that George Clemenceau could be happy with this. You know, the German army is definitely weaker than his own army. However, it definitely does still have an army. and that could be a problem in future if Germany's army was allowed to exist for France. This also could be seen as positive and negative for different people as well. Woodrow Wilson probably is quite upset with this because I imagine he's thinking about all the jobs that have been lost. He's probably thinking that France could now invade Germany, which is not peace. This is not a good peace agreement. It gives France too much power. If you think and understand everyone's ideas, you can think and really talk about these terms in incredible detail, but it requires you to do the thinking. Let's talk about the other terms though. The territorial terms. We can see mostly these early ones, so Article 45 for the Saar, 51 for Alsace-Lorraine, 87 for lands in Eastern Germany, and 119 for Germany's colonies. Again, think about what these are doing. These are taking money and resources and people away from Germany and giving them to other places. So those places are gaining while Germany is losing. And then the other terms, because some people like to remember economic terms, but I don't think there are any other economic terms. So other catches a few different things. See, first one, 1 to 26 creates the League of Nations. Those would please Woodrow Wilson. It's more like a political term, but it gives an opportunity for people to have some peace. Germany's forbidden to reunite with Austria. That term's more about friendships and alliances, and it angers the German people, but it also is not an economic term at all. At the bottom we've got Germany takes responsibility. This is definitely going to be pleasing Clemenceau, but it also is going to kind of anger the German people to a massive extent because they did not start the war. It was Austria-Hungary in some ways. And at the bottom 232, all reparations payments, which again, some will be happy, some will be sad. Lloyd George is going to be happy for his money element. I think Clemenceau wanted more. I think the German people feel completely ludicrously overpriced on this. Once you really grasp all of these terms and understand the before, during and after of them, any 16-mark question on this would be easy and stunning. But nonetheless, you've now got the before, why has it been created in such a way, and what the creation is. The next, though, is how do people react to it? See, we've got all of these political cartoons that try and exemplify how people feel, and you need to be able to prove their opinions using historical fact. So, for example, this source, it's not on my board, but this source comes from I believe it's a German magazine. I can't remember its name off the top of my head, but it's a German magazine in 1919. You in a question should be able to go, right, this source, I know this source comes from a German magazine. I know that Germany felt awful about the Treaty of Versailles because the terms were really harsh on them. For example, it limited their army to 100,000 men. It forced them to pay reparations of 6.6 billion pounds, and it took away territories such as the Saar, Alsace-Lorraine, and the Polish corridor. The source is depicting the big three of the Treaty of Versailles executing a person. I know that the big three were part of the organisation of the Treaty of Versailles, which makes me think that this person is Germany itself, and they are about to cut that person's head off. I know that those terms are going to affect Germany in the future. Reparations is going to make Germany economically unstable. The military terms, like 100,000 men, make Germany undefendable, and the loss of land is going to make Germany economically unstable and politically unstable in the future as well. So I feel that this source is saying that Germany is going to die. The country is not going to be the same, and the country might even be broken apart and taken by others because of the Treaty of Versailles. You should be using specific facts as you speak, all the way through. If you're not naming terms, if you're not giving specific statistics, and if you're not naming names, you are letting yourself down. You're being vague. If you want me to do another one, I'll have a little peek with this one. So I know this is a German piece one again, but this is a bit more specific than the one a bit earlier. So I can be specific with my language. I can go, I know this is from a German source. I know Germany was really upset about the Treaty of Versailles because it was harsh on their military. I can see, I know that they restricted the army to 100,000 men. They demilitarized the Rhineland. They had not allowed an air force, and they only allowed 6 battleships and 1,500 navy officers. This is a massive reduction in their army, and the source is trying to comment on this. In the source, it shows the German army being at 100,000 men, and it shows that Belgian, French, and I think Polish armies, all with different numbers of soldiers, all bigger and depicted as bigger around Germany. I feel that this is commenting that Germany's got such a small army and is surrounded by so much largess that Germany is undefendable. As well as this source also shows chains being around them. Chains are making me feel like this source is referring to that Germany is trapped or imprisoned by these countries, and France is in control of these prisons. I know that Clemenceau was argued for the harshest terms in the Treaty of Versailles because France was so damaged. That's why France is holding the chains, locking Germany in this source. Again, I'm trying to bring in things that I know about. This one is another classic one, Clemenceau and the Vampire, and this one is another classic one where Germany's organs are being stripped out. There's so much to talk about because I've gone for 20 minutes here and we've not even got to the end of the Treaty of Versailles. This is how much detail is available, and to be honest, I've not covered everything. So let's talk about the consequences now, because the consequences of the treaty could be used for some of these questions. See, when we say the Allies, we mean the big three. We mean a group working together, and Britain, France, and the USA are often referred to as the Allies of World War I. And you need to understand how they felt about this treaty. Now, I'm going to plonk this on the board so you can freeze it and just read it on your own. But if you want to hear me try and go through it, please do. I'm going to go through really fast this time. But essentially, once the treaty was finalised, after 6 months of hard work, no one was happy. Britain, who felt like the treaty was vaguely fair, as you already know, Lloyd George didn't really get enough money out of it. Lloyd George also predicted that it would cause a future war with Germany, and frankly, this whole situation, possibly for Britain, might not be the fairest one that they want. So this country is not actually that pleased with the treaty. So as much as I get money, I'm not actually happy. France found it too lenient. They felt that Germany should have been more harshly punished, so they fired Clemenceau. And Clemenceau is not elected in his next election because he did not punish them harsh enough. And the USA, they're an isolationist country, and they've just gone and watched their president go over and essentially give Britain loads of money and give France loads of land. And they felt like, what do you mean? You went in with peace on your mind and you've just let two countries basically capitalise on another country's failure. You are not very peaceful. And they refused to sign the treaty, they refused to ratify it, which meant that Woodrow Wilson couldn't get involved in the League of Nations. No one of the Allies was happy. And then if we think about another country that's going to be affected, Germany itself, of course Germany is not going to be happy. In fact, they felt like this treaty had its own usable name. They felt like this treaty was called a diktat, right? They had to sign this because they were losing the war. They had to agree to these terms. They had no say in the ability. There's no German leader in the big three, is there, expressing their opinion. These are being forced on them. So German people are going to feel like they don't deserve this stuff. So here is a classic quote from one of the people who signed the Treaty of Versailles, Count Brockdorff-Rantzau. Those who signed this treaty signed the death sentences of many millions of German men, women, and children. Right? He had to sign this. He agreed and signed to the piece of paper, but he's telling people, you've killed millions of German men, women, children. Right? Germans did not feel good about this. In fact, they protested and stormed the Reichstag to complain about the treaty. They felt that this whole thing was a nightmare. They felt it should not happen, but nothing could. German reaction just really tells us that the Germans were super upset. There's a number of reasons why this was. Germany, before the war, was led by an emperor called the Kaiser. So what a Kaiser controlled the military forces, controlled all the laws. You'll learn about this in the Germany section. But German people had no say in whether Germany joined the war or not. They didn't feel like they were, responsible for all the damage that was done. The Kaiser was. But the Kaiser just was abdicated and left. So the punishment went off the Kaiser and went on to the people. That doesn't make sense. In fact, actually, they felt so angry about it, they started calling, like Count Brockdorff-Rantzau, they called him, those who signed the treaty, the politicians who had to do it, the diktat, they started calling them the November criminals, because they signed the treaty in November. Now, this all proves to us a number of problems. They hated things like reparations, they hated things like Article 231, the War Guilt Clause. These all really affected just German mindset. And you can imagine it's defeatist because it comes up to all of those images that we see and all those depictions and feelings. You need to be able to depict them. this is just here a couple of questions that you can ask yourself about these things, but I've eventually told you them already. But then the final bit of peacemaking is this moment called, well, not just the Treaty of Sevres, but there's a number of other treaties. And I've got the textbook in front of me so that I can refer to it while I'm reading, but essentially the other treaties are just examples of things that prove to us the Treaty of Versailles is unfair. The best example for me is the Treaty of Sevres. This treaty punished Turkey for its role in the war, and essentially the public rioted. They protested just like you saw Germany did. They even threatened to start war again. And the big three, or essentially the Allies, all gave in. They did not let Turkey revolt and go to war again. They said, no, okay, we'll change it. And so the Treaty of Sevres was changed into what's called the Treaty of Lausanne. We don't need to worry too much about the terms. If you want the details, I believe the military terms were removed from the Treaty of Sevres, so Turkey got to keep its military. But you can see that Germany complained and nothing happened. They were still forced to suffer the consequences. Turkey complains, they're allowed to go free. It's an example of this being an unfair treaty. Other countries saw this, especially German people, saw this really negatively. Another example, so for example, Treaty of Saint-Germain, Austria basically was not given any reparations really to pay. Treaty of Neuilly has essentially, no military it has like a lesser reparations payment. Treaty of Trianon has no fixed reparations as well. The other countries got off light and Germany got off heavy. It was a tough battle. I'm going to skim this next bit because it's the stuff I'm going to talk about now. It's my little break. But this is a slide stolen from my Saturday session, so I'm going to ignore this. But that is all you need to know for peacemaking. The understanding, I'm going to call it before, middle, after of Treaty of Versailles. And the second unit is the League of Nations. The League of Nations is one of the creations of the Treaty of Versailles. It's one of the things inside of the Treaty of Versailles. But you need to understand, I said, before, during, after. What is the basis of the League of Nations? What's the beginning of it? What does the League of Nations physically go and do? And then how does this League of Nations fail? It's the end of it. Why is it not a fighting force to stop World War II from beginning? And I mean, a lot of the ideas behind this League of Nations you know already. They come from Woodrow Wilson. They are a peacemaking group. I like to refer to them as the early version of the United Nations nowadays, which is like the World Peacemaking Group. Now, his priorities essentially were to stop America having wars. So he was like, if I get world peace, America will never have to go into a war again. Perfect. And he popularized the phrase, the war to end all wars. And all this really did was like, right, how am I going to stop wars? So he had a few tricks to do this. So first one was to actually organize a place to set up where countries can talk to each other. The word that he used would be mitigation, which is just talking to each other. But essentially countries would go to Geneva in Switzerland and they would meet up in what's called the Palais Wilson, which is essentially Wilson's palace, and they would go and talk out their problems. Switzerland is a neutral country. It doesn't get involved in any wars really, so they thought this was like a peacemaking summit, a place for people to go to be peaceful. Now, it had 4 major aims: to encourage cooperation between countries, essentially to encourage countries to work together, right? So to avoiding war together, as we say, ending those bad relationships, making countries want to work together, basically making people be friends. Another one, disarmament, which means to reduce the amount of weapons around the world. Again, if we want world peace to happen, we don't want countries with the ability to start wars. So if everyone has no weapons, no one can fight. As well as this, they were improving social conditions. This is a complicated one, but essentially people go to war because they're angry and upset and sad. If you make everyone in the world happy by, let's say, improving their wages, reducing the diseases and getting them more food, they've got no reason to be angry and go to war with other people. So improving social conditions, and then world peace. No wars in the world anywhere. These are their goals. These are the end goals for the League of Nations. These are the things that they should be doing at all times. And some year 11 mentioned last year even, and they said, a bit lofty, innit? A bit ambitious. And I used the phrase with the attend this year set, calling like, if any of you do business, you know what a smart target is. How manageable, how achievable, how time specific, are these targets? Can you be certain that you will remove every single weapon on Earth? Are you certain every country is going to be able to cooperate with each other? Are you certain you are going to be able to create peace? And that's not super achievable. You could say that these are there as like a goal to keep you on track, but a lot of these goals are really hard to manage, and it sets up the league for a bit of an issue going forward. As well as this, we need to know how they would do it, and there's a word for it. See, they wanted to work as a team. It wasn't just a group for parties who hate each other to kind of come together and natter and talk about each other. No. The whole world wanted to work as a team. If you remember when we talked about the EU and migration, the whole idea of the EU is that as a team, when someone's upset or angry or goes against the team, everyone is suddenly in the bigger side. If the whole world is on a team, 100 people all holding arms together, and one country starts wars, that's 100 v 1 essentially. We can unite against those things. We can unite against them and therefore stop war. And this is a phrase called collective security. Everyone as a collective is working to basically work as bodyguards for each other. And it's genuinely, collective security is how the United Nations works in the modern day, but it's also really a phrase that the League of Nations definitely should have had. The League of Nations did not have collective security. There were countries in the world that did not join the League of Nations. You know that the USA is one of them. So we know that the USA could start wars and the League of Nations would have no power over them. So this phrase, as much as it's lofty and it would work, it's not actually how it played out. On top of this, the ways, the things, the powers that the League would use to deal with its problems would be essentially to punish people. They need to punish people, so how do they punish them? And they actually have 3 methods to punish people. First one is mitigation itself. They would force countries who were in the League to get into a meeting so that they could get some sort of solution. That is a power, genuinely what they'd do. As well as that, the League could morally condemn people. This basically means publicly being shamed. It's essentially going up in assembly and publicly saying that this person's terrible. They've done a crime and everyone should be sad about that. And you could therefore maybe encourage other countries not to trade with them or to not engage. But as well as that, the League actually had economic sanctions to back that up. The League could ask its members to stop trading or buying from certain countries. This one's also finicky because, again, we'll see later, but if you want to punish someone by stopping them buying something, let's say, you need everyone on side, or they could just buy it from somebody else. And on top of all of this, the League, in its own problem-solving method, it didn't have an army on its own. So it could ask for armies to get supported, but that doesn't mean you actually have an army ready to go. It means you're going to have to be slow and wait for another army to work it out. See, this whole process was to try and have an ideal where, let's say, a problem kicks off, they go to the League, they have a talk, and they come to an agreement, and peace is achieved, right? These things could be the ideal situation. But the League's plans and strategies weren't well thought out. Remember, they were rushed in 6 months, basically. So when it actually came to the League of Nations doing anything, let's say a problem would happen, they go to the League, and they wouldn't actually come to a solution. They might even go to war, because talking might not be good enough. Economic sanctions and moral condemnation and collective security were not perfect. And so these ideals, these ideas, these aims of the League, as much as they are lofty and well-cited and based in trying to create peace, they're not actually feasible. They're not actually very feasible in the real world. And we look at the different strengths and weaknesses of the League. In fact, actually, I've got this page is going to be the strengths and weaknesses of the League. This is just a big list that I hand out to everyone. I'm so sorry, it's small, but let's just quickly talk through a few of these. So Britain and France, 2 major countries, are in the League of Nations, but they're too poor to get involved in conflict. So if they can't involve in conflict, they're not going to go and solve wars. It's almost like watching two people have a gunfight or a knife fight, and I don't have any knife or gun of my own to get involved. I'm not going to get involved, otherwise I'll get hurt. That's the mentality of the people inside of here. The USA, one of the world's strongest countries, one of the most richest countries, powerful military, does not join, right? League of Nations doesn't have that ability, and should we say someone could trade with the USA outside the League. League can impose sanctions, so it can punish people, and it deals with humanitarian issues, so it is trying to reduce the likelihood of war. A weird thing about the League of Nations as well, we think about that collective security thing. Everyone's trying to be working as a team, but you can leave and join the League whenever you like. So countries could just ditch the League and not really care about it and not suffer any consequences for this. So members could weasel their way around the League's laws and rules. It was seen as a winner's club, as in you won the war, so you get to decide how the world works now. And so the countries that lost the war came in with a mentality that we're not a member of this club. We don't get a choice. We're just being forced to do this, just like Germany was with the treaty, right? It was a different system, so it was less likely to cause war than the old alliance system that was being used beforehand. It was Eurocentric, which is definitely bad, because let's say a country in South America starts war. How is Europe going to reply to that? Slowly. So this worldwide organisation was not actually worldwide. Most of the countries involved in it were not from all corners of the earth. It had no army. We've already spoken about this. They cannot physically fight back quickly or easily. Some countries at the start of this were not allowed to join. So thinking about this collective security mindset, these countries who are already angry have basically not been allowed to. They're unable to engage with peace. So of course they're going to be warmongers again. Earlier I told you that the League was, it had a positive mindset, a positive mentality. So yes, people were trying to engage with the League, which is a success. This one's a big one, and we're going to talk about this in 2 seconds, but the League's decisions had to be unanimous. The League's decisions, or at least the Assembly's decisions, had to be unanimous. I think we're going to talk about that in a moment, but essentially that unanimous decision-making takes a long time for people to agree. The League was complicated, which meant things were slow and confusing for people, so it takes slow decisions. Sorry, pardon. The League also, and I'm leaning over so you can't see my face, the League did have a lot of members, 63 members. It was the largest worldwide international organisation of its time, but it just wasn't the world. It wasn't everywhere. It was mostly European countries, like we said before. So it could stop war for some, but not for all. And as well, the League was created by the Treaty of Versailles, an unpopular treaty. We just said no one was happy about it. It had to agree with the Treaty of Versailles, otherwise why is the point in it existing? So that promotes this idea that they have to be the bad guy to a lot of people. No one's going to complain enough, and they'll go, no, okay, the Treaty of Versailles was bad. They are a part of that treaty. And then last one, it did receive popular support from some world leaders. You get a gist of that from the beginning. The League of Nations was kind of problematic, and there's a really good phrase to say that it's toothless. Use a really good phrase to say the League of Nations is unable to bite. It is sat there unable to have any sort of fear factor to someone to stop war. They look quite weak, so therefore war looks quite doable for a lot of countries. And we look at that when we see some of these magazines. So I'm going to do another little bit talking about sources to show you what I mean from just the stuff we've read so far. But this is a British cartoon from 1919 called Gap in the Bridge. So this source is from Britain. I know that Britain was a member state of the League of Nations, but I know the League of Nations was problematic. Punch magazine is satirical, so it's going to be making fun of the League. And when we look at the picture, it definitely is. So in the source, I can see that the Keystone USA is missing from this bridge of the League of Nations. I know that the USA did not ratify the Treaty of Versailles and did not join the League of Nations. This meant that the League of Nations did not have access to the money of the USA as well as the army of the USA, which meant that if war was to start, the League of Nations was not as strong as it could have been, and the threat of this money and this army would have scared some countries into not starting war, but without the USA, they are unable to use this scare factor, so war is more likely. Therefore, this bridge of peace, should we say, is not complete. I'm trying to explain, just like I did with the Treaty of Versailles, specific parts of the treaty or the League and go big outwards into this means that, this is causing, this is because. I want to give the before, during and after of every little point I can. I can do a couple more. This one is an American cartoon. So I know America did not join the League of Nations. They refused to ratify the treaty. And I know, therefore, that they will not have a positive view of the treaty because they saw the treaty of, they saw the League of Nations as something to take from America. In the source, you can see Japan, England, other council members of the League pulling on the USA, tying their hands together. I know that the League would ask for armies of other member states or ask for money from member states. So I know that this is the USA feeling like they would be restricted if they had joined the League of Nations. This is saying that the League of Nations is a bad organisation to join because it ties you up by overstretching and demanding things of you. We're trying to be more detailed. I mean, this one is, should we say, a rabbit via serpent, referring to the League being unable to reply. And actually, that's the interesting bit, because the next bit, other than the structure, the organisation, the setup for the League of Nations, is that the League of Nations, you now need got the before, the why. Now we need to start looking at the how, the during, the what does the League actually do. So to start, we use this phrase: the League fails and succeeds in the 1920s. See, the League of Nations goes out into the 1920s and it goes off and tries to deal with some of the world's problems. It tries to fix some of the world's problems. It tries to stop wars, and we get a series of goods and bads. Now, I'm not going to go through all the goods and bads today because they're in other videos. There is a video that goes through more detailedly. And in fact, I'll just plonk all of the ones that, in my opinion, exemplify this. But to be really confident with this question, I'm going to talk about two of them just to be safe and sure. So hopefully my slides all work out nicely. Yes, they do. So we're going to talk about Vilna. Vilna is my example case failure of the League of Nations in the 1920s. It's really nice and easy. The way we're going to do it is we're just going to grab simple facts. So the name of the event is Vilna and the year of the event is 1920, right after the start. And what we want to keep track of is, well, the two countries that are involved and what's going down. So let's get a short description. You could read the stuff on the right hand side, but essentially two countries, Poland and Lithuania. Poland invades Lithuanian capital, and that's it, right? We need to decide whether this is a success or failure. Now we read down, we go, right, did they stop the war? And it says here, Poland did ignore the League of Nations. That's clearly a failure. The League did not stop a war, it did not stop an invasion, a country got away with something. And really, this failure to intervene is something the League of Nations does quite a lot of times. So it's a really good example of failure, but we need an example success as well. So my example success, which you'll all hopefully have memorised, is the Åland Islands, which are between Sweden and Finland. Now my board's going to have some poor info, I think, so I'm not going to go through the stuff on my board, but it has to. I'll just put it all there and we'll just say it out loud. Name of event, Åland Islands. Year of event, 1921. Short description, the two countries involved. Sweden and Finland are arguing over the same set of islands. The League comes in, says Finland gets the islands, but with some caveats so that Sweden is happy. Both of them agree. Well, there's no war, is there? So we can say this is a success for the League because this kind of mitigation, collective security, collective bargaining allowed for some peace. Now, a lot of people then go, oh, okay, right, I know those events that happen. Am I done? There are two more things, two more short things, two more international agreements for the League. See, as much as I'm always going to be bringing this man up all the time, there are some agreements that happen that are not involving the League of Nations, but they affect world peace. So therefore, the League of Nations should know about them. And let's just talk about that. So if you've studied your Germany stuff, you know who Gustav Stresemann is, and you know that I love him. But essentially, with Gustav, he is just trying to make Germany a better place. And one of the ways he tries to make Germany a better place, which we don't need to go into the reasons why, is to try and get Germany involved with other countries. Now, Germany's got this kind of reputation. It's accepted in the Treaty of Versailles that they caused the war and took responsibility for all the damage. Everyone hates Germany. So how does he try to get people to like him again, or like Germany again, for example? So he wants to get rid of that reputation. And the Locarno Treaty, Locarno Pact in 1925 is one of those 1920s events, and it is just trying to get people to like Germany. See, all they do is he goes, I'll put them all up on the board, but essentially through a number of different, should we say, parts, the treaty says that Germany's not going to go to war with everyone. I promise, I'm agreeing, I proposed this treaty, so, you know, I'm the one who cares about saying this. And all the other countries around Germany, the ones that it physically touches on the map, all of them go, okay, cool, we'll protect you, you protect us, let's try and stop war, which is all quite nice and useful, isn't it? But it's embarrassing. Like I said earlier, this helps world peace, doesn't it? That Germany's not getting to war. And is the League involved? No. In fact, the League banned Germany from being in the League of Nations. So if this is causing peace, what's the point in the League of Nations existing if peace can be created without them? And it causes this, like, right, we need to kind of get involved. And the embarrassments keep happening. The Kellogg-Briand Pact is a couple of years later, but it's, again, Gustav Stresemann and Germany trying to promote their kind of feelings. And it's even the USA, another non-member. It's a document that basically just says, I swear to stop using violence to solve problems. And the League doesn't get involved, and 72 countries sign it. That's more people, more countries, than there are in the League of Nations at this time. So the world is already organising peace, but the League of Nations is just not doing it. The League of Nations is just not a part of this peacemaking process, which is, should we say, arguably a failure on their part to be involved. Now, this whole period here ends with this thing called the Wall Street crash, which you know about in a bit more detail with the Germany topic, which hopefully I'll be able to make a video on in this week. But essentially, this period of time, there was a lot of money being used and done by the USA. I'm not going to go through all the details, but all this money crashes in 1929, and the whole world is sent into this period of basically economic strife. People are struggling to eat, people are struggling to find jobs, people are struggling to make money. And the League has a series of consequences happening. The whole world is poor, so are they going to care about peace? I tell students in class, if someone stole your phone or stole your wallet just before you came to class, would you be thinking about what's happening in class, or would you be thinking about the thing that's happening to you? The rest of the world is prioritising themselves now. The rest of the world is going through a really hard social condition, and they're like, I'm going to focus on me first. Sorry, world peace. I'd like, me to be happy. So this reduces an importance on the League of Nations and opens up the League for two major failures in the 1930s, which are the Manchurian and Abyssinian crisis. And they are the last things you need to look at. See, these two crises, you need to know why they happen and the League's reaction / consequences. That these two parts are essentially two different lessons now. So I'm going to go through them as if I've not taught this before, but I'm going to remind you of the key bits about the Manchurian crisis to start. So firstly, Manchuria is an area in China, a province in China. It's this northern province up here. In this province are, should we say, commodity resources that are easy to sell. They are like coal and iron ore. Everyone needs them, so you could sell those quite valuably. And China at this point in time is not the economic powerhouse it is nowadays, but at this point there are resources there that just are being used and made. Nearby to China is Japan, a council member of the League of Nations that is going through the Great Depression. Japan's industry, Japan's economy, the way Japan made money was based in luxury items like silk, right? If you're poor, you are not going to be spending hundreds of pounds buying silk clothing. Why would you do that? That's stupid. So no one on earth, because everyone is poor, is buying Japan's stuff. Japan's making these rich luxury items and no one's buying them. So Japan is making no money. So this lack of money means that the Japanese people are struggling. There is no money coming into the government. There is no money coming into businesses. Businesses are shutting down. What on earth is going to happen to the Japanese people if something's not done about it? And essentially, the Japanese government, which is now at this time being ran by generals, and it's being ran by people who are not nice, see Manchuria and go, right, if we got that coal and iron ore, we could sell that, and that could make us money. So they go and steal it in plain sight. They try, because they're a member of if they're a council member of the League of Nations, they need to uphold those values, you know, world peace, disarmament. How do they invade another country without being noticed, essentially? How do they go away and do that? And the way they try and do this is via the Mukden incident in 1931. And you've definitely seen this story, and hopefully you remember it. There is an explosion on the railway. Japan blames China, saying, oh my God, they've attacked our railway. China says, we did nothing, our soldiers were asleep, what are you talking about? But because the Japanese railway in Manchuria is endangered, Japan sends its army in to secure it. The Japanese people now have captured another area. Their government makes everyone go, woo, celebration, and they install their own puppet leader, they rename it, it's now a part of Japan. And the rest of the world watches this and goes, that's definitely not right. And the League of Nations goes, oh yeah, that's definitely not right. God, what do? Japan's a council member. We can't just like punish Japan. Japan's like got veto powers. How do we punish Japan? Okay, wait. While we think of something to do to punish Japan, let's make sure Japan did nothing wrong. And they send a guy called Lord Lytton to Manchuria to go and examine and talk to the locals and talk things out. And he comes back and says, Japan did it. Japan is in the wrong. Japan should give Manchuria back. And it took him 6 months to do that. 6 months to go and say, yeah, it's just that. Yeah, here's the note, right? So he's saying these things, and everyone's like, yeah, obviously. And this link attaches to a video of Japan just leaving the League of Nations, quitting. No, I'm not dealing with you. So the Manchurian crisis is quite short. It's got a simple event and a simple solution. Japan doesn't have any consequences done to it. The League is slow. The League does nothing. And essentially the whole world watches the League let Japan get away with it. So the reputation of the League of Nations at this point is in the gutter. But this is not the killing blow for the League of Nations. This is arguably one of the leading up to killer blows. This guy is the killer blow. This is Benito Mussolini, Prime Minister of Italy. He is a fascist leader, a military leader, and he is going to be one of the allies of Hitler in the Road to War section. See, this is Abyssinia, modern day Ethiopia. This is partly a big area of importance for Benito. Mussolini had been looking at Abyssinia, wanting to invade it for many, many years. The reasons and cause for that, we'll get into in just a moment actually, but I'll come back, are varied and there's genuinely more than one reason for Mussolini to want Abyssinia. He is a dictator. He wants Italy to expand. So getting more land means more money and more resources. Actually, you know what? More money, more resources is obvious as well. Another thing, he owns countries, or he has 2 colonies next to Abyssinia, Somaliland, which is modern day Somalia, and Eritrea. So his forces are already nearby. It would be an easy invasion. And a really key reason you need to remember with this is that he had just watched the League fail to stop the Manchurian crisis. So he watched them fail, and he's a council member as well. He goes, right, cool. If they fail with Japan, they'll fail with me. I can go invade that country, and I will be let off. And there's another part to it. This Strasser front, which I'll talk about in a moment, he's already got good relations with the leaders of the League and feels like he can get away with this. So what he does is a big series of events. There's a lot of phrases you might want to remember, but essentially, just like with the Mukden incident, there is a coincidental cause, specifically a fight in Walwal. 150 people are injured or killed, and essentially it's an excuse for Italy to go and invade. Oh my God, my soldiers have been killed, I need to invade your country. So from Eritrea and from Somaliland or Somalia, there is an invasion of Ethiopia. And this invasion is done with excessive military force. There are chemical weapons used on people that could not fight back. There is a lot of death and killing. It is an obscene warlike action done by another member council of the League of Nations. So that's the why and the how. What's the response? Here's the phrase I use with this one. The League of Nations betrayed Abyssinia in 1935. They let Abyssinia down. There are many multiple ways in how the League badly affected Abyssinia. And here I'm going to say it's 3 things for you to remember. One of the ways they failed is via the Suez Canal. You might remember the Suez Canal. In fact, I'm going to laser beam it. Can you see it over here on my little screen? See, the Suez Canal is a shipping route. It is an area for ships to go through. You might remember it from migration to India, but lots of countries use the Suez Canal, so it's a big money maker for a lot of countries. And if you can see, it is the way that Italy is going to be getting its soldiers down to Abyssinia. It is the method. If there is no Suez Canal, they're going to have to send them round, they're going to have to walk across, or they're going to have to fly, right? This is the easiest and cheapest way for Italy, to go and access Abyssinia. And the League then has a choice. What could the League do to the canal? They could close it. If the canal is closed or they block Italians from going through it in some way, they can hopefully stop the invasion or slow it. Now, as you know, decision making in the League goes through a number of sources. It goes firstly to the Assembly. Now, if we think about the Assembly, it's 63 different groups of people, and they all probably use the Suez Canal in different ways, and they all use the Suez Canal to make money, right? They all use this to make money. So if they close it, they're going to lose out. They're going to lose their money. And it's the Great Depression, isn't it? So why would you vote to lose money? So some of them do say yes. The ones that care about peace did say yes, but there are naturally going to be some that go, my country really needs the money right now. We're really poor, so I'm going to have to say no to that idea. And that forces a unanimous vote to fail. So the Assembly can't make a decision. And therefore, the League does not close the Suez Canal. The League is like, yeah, we can't make an agreement on closing this, so it's just going to have to stay open. And therefore, more soldiers from Italy just made their way to Abyssinia unstopped. On top of that, sanctions are a way the League can punish people. We talked about sanctions earlier. And in fact, they did try and sanction people. They were like, we didn't do any sanctions with Manchuria. We need to do some sanctions with Abyssinia, so let's make sure we do stuff. And I ask students to tell me, like, what could you sanction to stop a war? Oh, we could ban them from getting weapons, or we could, restrict their money in some way. And we think, yeah, this is definitely the route to go. But also, the League is watching 2 countries fight a war. Is it fair? Is it going to stop a war if we only stop one side from fighting? The fair decision is to stop both sides so that the war ends. And without making a table, I'm going to show you what they do. So Italy, being the aggressor, the League and the Assembly do agree to punish them in some ways. They economically sanction to stop the sale of anything. So they're trying to stop Italy having any income. But Italy can just use the money it already has. If you've been saving up hundreds of pounds and then someone says, no more money for you, that doesn't mean you've lost money at the present moment. So that doesn't actually stop them fighting. And in fact, actually, the League banned the sale of weapons to Italy as well. You're not allowed to buy weapons anymore. Let's stop your war. Same problem. Italy's already got weapons. It's already got stuff. So how does that stop them fighting? And you know what? There's one other thing that they could sanction, which is oil. Oil, as you might know from your science lessons, is used to create things like petrol and kerosene, a number of different chemicals. But fuels, they power your cars, your boats, your planes. You need that stuff to essentially work. And the League, if they banned the sale of oil, would stop Mussolini from being able to use his cars, his weapons, whatever. But they didn't do it. And the reason why they didn't do it is because they did not have collective security. The League of Nations did not have a collective security of all nations on Earth. It didn't have everyone on the same team. And if the League banned the sale of oil to Italy, Italy could just buy oil from the USA, or it could buy oil from the USSR. because they weren't in the League of Nations. And so the League just doesn't bother to ban oil because they know that they could have got it from USA or USSR. They let Italy have that resource. And then, to be fair, they banned weapons being sold to Abyssinia, which is the less militaristic nation. They don't have a fascist leader. So Abyssinia basically had no weapons to defend themselves with. When I say the League betrayed Abyssinia, I really mean it here. The decision making here is clearly not well thought through enough to actually stop a war. And the last one is involving these two. These two are Pierre Laval, who is the French Foreign Minister, and Samuel Hoare, who is the British Foreign Minister. These two are representing Britain and France on a foreign scale. They are in the League of Nations. They're probably representing that group here, and they have an interest in this conflict. They are in an alliance with Mussolini. It's called the Strasse Front. Britain and France are very terrified of Hitler, who I'll come back to in a different video, I think, actually now. But they are scared of Hitler. They are worried he is going to, start a new war. And they don't want Hitler to have friends. So they form a Strasse Front. They draw this thing called the Strasse Front with Italy, saying, we'll be friends with Italy if you don't be friends with Hitler. And because they've made this agreement, they're kind of on Italy's side in the Abyssinian crisis. And that they can't really go against Italy because they'll lose their friend and lose this, Strasse Front. So they kind of have to do as Italy says. So behind the League's back, behind the Council's back, on their own, they go up to Mussolini and they offer Abyssinia to him. It's called the Hoare-Laval Pact, and they offered it to him, which obviously is Britain and France now betraying the League of Nations. Japan takes Manchuria, Italy takes Abyssinia, and Britain and France offer up countries to dictators. And luckily, it doesn't go through. Before the plan is agreed upon, before the plan even occurs, news reporters get hold of it and they release it to the press. It's a big news story and people are very shocked. Yeah, because Britain and France look like they don't care about peace anymore. In fact, actually, Hoare and Laval have to resign. They are disgraced on a public stage. And Britain and France look like they don't care about peace. They care about themselves and their own ideas about, promoting peace and stopping Hitler. They don't look like they care about world peace. Every single leader in that council gives up. Later on we'll talk about how Germany joins the League of Nations and Hitler takes them out of the League of Nations as well. So the other leaders of the council look bad as well. The whole thing with the League of Nations is this routine of they try and fail so many different times, but knowing all the different ways that they fail and knowing the key phrases about them are really, really useful. Now, I'm aware that I've just crossed the hour mark of purely talking. I've not stopped. This has all been one take. In fact, take one is what this video has been. And I'm going to have to take a break because my voice is hurting. I will make a Road to War video tomorrow, maybe later on. But we're going to talk about the remainder of Germany conflict tension in this kind of time for you to be able to watch in your own phrasing. Thank you for watching. If you've watched this whole thing, even if you watched little bits, it's hopefully going to be useful for you to just understand the storyline as we go. I'm going to end it here. Thank you very much. I'll see you later.